Very good. Thank you, Harry. And welcome to the national headquarters of the Theosophical Society in America. My name is John Chianchosi. I'm the Director of Public Programs. I organize these type of programs. This is our Thursday lecture series. Most of you have been here before, so you know the drill. At this time, I request that you turn off your cell phones and other noise-making electronic devices. This evening's presentation is being streamed live, so we also welcome people watching through the internet. As you know, the Theosophical Society promotes study, meditation, and service. We encourage open-minded inquiry into the world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts. And we have a deep respect for the unity of all life. Our goal is to help people explore the spiritual path so as to arrive at a deeper understanding regarding the wisdom of the ages. Furthermore, we feel this wisdom is not limited to any one tradition, and thus we offer programs from most traditions. I invite you to take one of our program catalogs if you have not already done so, and in there you'll find the programs that are being offered during the remaining month of March. The new program catalog just arrived, a little damaged and damp, but nevertheless, it will be soon available, and that has all the programs that we'll be offering during the spring-summer season. Of course, you can also find these programs listed on our website, and there you can register for any that are of special interest to you. The Theosophical Society is a membership organization, and we are always happy to welcome new members and renewing members. However, what we offer here, including all the programs, the resources of our library, our bookshop, and our campus, is open to the public, and everyone is always welcome. Come often. This evening, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce someone who is probably known to all of you, and this is Juliana Cesano. She works here at the Theosophical Society, or has worked here for quite a number of years, as long as I have almost, which is a long time. And she has given lectures and led workshops and taught meditation and yoga here on a regular basis. So she's not someone new to us. She is our certified yoga teacher, and now she's also teaching the Sunday meditation group on a regular basis, which is a free meditation group that meets every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And of course, you're welcome to join that. Juliana has, for many years, had an interest in spirituality, theosophy in particular, but spirituality in general, meditation, and exploring various approaches to the spiritual and contemplative life. She spent 2 years at the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society in Chennai, in India, and is currently the manager of the Quest bookshop. And there you can find her most days. Her yoga class is on Tuesday night, and if you're interested in pursuing the practice of Hatha Yoga in a meditative environment, I certainly encourage you to consider joining that class. Tonight she will speak on life after death, how daily living shapes the after-death experience. Please join me in welcoming Juliana Cesano.
Thank you, John, and thank you, friends, for being here tonight for this very important subject that touches us all. We know that sooner or later, this is part of an experience that we had to live. However, it seems as if we sometimes didn't know enough about what it is that is going to happen as we leave this physical body, as we transition into other states. So tonight I'm going to share with you some elements that are found on theosophical teachings. This particular subject is quite technical, and it has many, many details, many more than you would want to hear, and many more than I can share in an hour. And even though it is a very technical subject, I just want to approach it in a more intuitive way. I just want to share some elements and see if through our own imagination, through our own spiritual intuition, we can grasp, we can have a sense of what this is about. And maybe this will spark some interest in you to do some more research to study this subject in depth. It is, we can treat it as something, on the surface, or we can treat it in depth, and both, I think, are useful and important. If you are interested in knowing literature about this subject, the library put together a very good table over there with introductory books on death and life after death that I highly recommend. Very good titles were selected. So, like I said, this is a very technical subject, and what I will share with you is my own understanding of it so far, and I will share the most important aspects, or the ones that I particularly want to highlight tonight. I do want to mention that this information by no means is trying to disregard how sad, how difficult it is to lose a loved one. Recently, in our own family, we lost a very dear friend, and so I had the chance to go through the sadness, to go through grief. The same with happened to my husband and my 5-year-old daughter, who went for the first time through the process of grieving. So it is certainly a very sacred subject, because it touches us deeply. There's probably nothing in life that touches us more than losing a loved one. So it is something that needs to be treated with tremendous respect, and as a sacred subject. So what I'm going to offer tonight is a hypothesis. Let's put it that way. It is a set of teachings that were offered through the Theosophical Society in the early foundation of the organization. This particular hypothesis is going to assume that two principles are a reality. One of them is reincarnation, and the other one is the evolution of consciousness. So we're going to assume that reincarnation is a fact, and that we come again and again to different lifetimes to evolve, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, most of all spiritually, to awaken to a higher reality, a much higher reality. So at first, this knowledge can seem to be just information. It can just be intellectual knowledge. However, the more we reflect on it, and the more we try to perceive this life with these elements, it may open up new perceptions for us, new understandings. And that is the goal of this talk. So if this stays just at an intellectual level, and we make maybe a mental picture of it, it won't do much for us, maybe a little bit. But if we try to conceive, to see every day, what does that mean, it may create a much greater impact. And maybe our actions will begin to mold according to that new understanding. So from a certain perspective, we're going to say that there is no such thing as death. There is only transition, a transition from one state into another. life is a continuum. If you notice, we are surrounded by cycles. Nature is constantly showing us that life is about cycles. And we see this all the time. We see how the seasons come and go. However, we never think, oh, winter has just died. Especially here in Chicago. We have never seen anybody crying about winter dying. Probably because we know that winter is coming back. So there's no such sense of death. However, if our life was very, very short, we will experience the death, or the end of winter as the death of winter. So maybe we can start looking at life as that continuum, and to notice more and more that no state lasts forever. Sometimes when you have children, especially, you feel that a particular tough moment is going to stay forever, and this is going to be the rest of my life. It's going to look like this. And we forget that no state really lasts forever. It changes constantly. So that is what we call death. Change is inevitable. So acceptance is going to play a big part on this, especially when it is, not only when it's another person who's leaving, but when it's us. Apparently, and according to these teachings, what we feel and what we think at the moment of death is very, very important. Our own understanding of the process of death is very important. If we're resisting, if we are in denial, if we are not accepting what's happening, the transition is going to be much harder, and what happens after death is going to be also a little harder on us. So, in many ways, the way we come into the world and the way we leave the world has a resemblance. They look alike. When you are about to give birth, the whole act of giving birth is a miracle, and it's a very sacred moment. And it involves, most of all, acceptance and letting go. There is the time in which you just have to let go of all the fears that you have, of all the things that can possibly go wrong, and relax completely, so the process, almost like stay out of the way so the process can take place. A friend of mine some years ago lost her husband, and she told me how much it reminded her while she was helping her husband leave this physical plane, how much it reminded her of the process of giving birth, and how that preparation takes place and we get ready to go. So in those moments, it's very important that we keep in mind that it is a sacred moment. And what we do in sacred places, what do? We enter quietly, we are perceptive. And in both cases, we can greatly benefit from sending loving thoughts to the person who's leaving and praying that they would transition in peace and in the best possible way. So, as we live this physical life, sometimes we think that we can do it in a pretty good way, I think. We can sometimes hide who we really are. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. We're not aware of who we truly are. And sometimes we also hide to others some aspects of ourselves, and we just choose to show certain others. So nobody has really a full picture of us, of who we really are, our shortcomings, our virtues. But nature does. nature knows us inside and out. From this perspective, we're going to see that every single thought, every emotion, every word we say, every action is recorded and almost marked in us as a tattoo, invisible to our own eyes, visible to the eyes of some people. Some clairvoyants are skilled enough to see those elements in our aura, in our auric egg, the energy, the egg surrounding us. So there are all the impressions of this lifetime. And maybe the easiest way of seeing this sometimes is through vibration. Every word, every thought, every emotion vibrates. And that vibration creates our bodies. We're going to see that we don't only have a physical body, we have other bodies as well. So when we die, the process is completely natural because it is just the consequence of who we are. And we're going to see how that applies in each step. But for now, we want to remember that there's no way we can hide that to nature. It's just a fact. All the things are imprinted in us. So the main aspects of this transition is the same for everybody. The main aspects. However, the details are very unique to each of us because they depend on how we vibrate at each level. So I'm going to share only what happens to the average person, and we are all average people, special but average, and what happens when we die from natural death. So when the body has, the mind and the emotions have a time to prepare or to begin the process of letting go and then finally leaving. In the Theosophical literature, one of the main subjects has to do with the fact that there are 7 planes of existence, or 7 dimensions, 7 states of being. And this is very important to understand the processes of death. So we're not going to see the 7 of them, but we're going to focus on the ones that are important for life, for the transition of life from the way we know it into life into the way we also know it, but we forgot. So we're all familiar with the physical body and the physical plane. We have the senses. We have an idea of how matter is, even though scientists say that a table is pretty much space. However, it becomes for us is solid. Like every object at the physical plane is solid. We know the laws of nature, the laws that apply to the physical world. We're familiar with that. Now, there is around our physical body something that is called the etheric double. And it's subtler body that is sometimes said to be actually our real body, our real physical body. But this is a subtler body that is an exact duplication of the physical, but much subtler. Sometimes some people can see a kind of a line of energy around the physical body, and that's the etheric body. This body supplies vitality, the vital force, prana, into our physical body. And it's the one responsible for this life, the life that animates the body, to stay cohesive and coherent, to function as a unit. Otherwise, if you leave the cells, and that's what happens actually when we die, if you leave the body on its own, it would just become a complete chaos. and disintegrate. So the integrated force, the intelligence of the body, is this etheric double. It is said that the etheric double is united to the physical body through a cord. So we have to remember that. So the next plane, right next to the physical in terms of subtlety, not in terms of space. So we're going to have to clarify that all these planes are right here. They're not somewhere else. They're just right here. They're just in a different dimension or in a different state. So the next plane, as I was saying, is what is called the emotional plane or the astral plane. And that corresponds to another body that we also have, that is the emotional body or the astral body. So the astral plane is what clairvoyants, for example, trained clairvoyants can sometimes see. It is more like a see-through kind of world in which you can, if there is a column, you can see every single angle of the column because it will be like, transparent, let's say. It's also described as a place where there is great brilliance and kind of floaty elements. But it is our emotional, the emotional plane, but sometimes you will see it as the astral plane and the astral body. This is a plane that we are familiar with. Have you ever asked yourself where you go when you sleep? So when you sleep, your physical body rests, and you go into the astral plane. So we're very familiar with this plane. We go there every night. So we're going to see how that... So I will describe these first three planes, and then we move into the actual process of dying. So in that astral plane, you're going to find people who are alive and are sleeping. You're going to find people who already passed away, who left their physical bodies. In that plane, we find entities like nature spirits, angels, the astral bodies of animals, semi-intelligent entities, etc., etc. I don't know if you remember, but when Robin Finseth was here a few years ago giving a talk, she is a clairvoyant, and she said, "You think this room is empty. This room is full." So that gives you a sense of how the astral plane works. The background of the astral plane is the physical plane. So it is right here. So these planes interpenetrate one another. Sometimes when we do descriptions, and you're going to see my hands going, as a lower is the physical, is lower, the astral comes next, the mental comes above, but there's really no such thing as higher and lower in that way. They're all interpenetrating each other. But it helps the mind to understand subtle, denser states, subtler states, lower states, higher states. Actually, they say that higher states are not necessarily higher vibration, but quicker vibration. So that's the way we're going to see it. Right after the astral plane is the mental plane. And as you can already imagine, we also have a mental body. So the mental plane is quite a high state. It's, sometimes we associate mental with thoughts, and because our thoughts tend to be chaotic or just plain, we imagine a mental plane to be maybe dull, maybe chaotic, but nothing like that. The mental plane is probably the highest at this point that we can reach. And it is described as, is defined by an intense sense of bliss, of universal joy. And it is possibly, in my opinion, the place that some teachers have described, some meditating teachers of meditation or spiritual teachers have described as the place that they experience as in particular states of meditation. So this is a higher plane. And actually in each of these planes, and I'm just going to mention this because it's going to be important, is subdivided in 7 layers. And it is said that in the first 3 upper, higher levels of the mental plane is where our true self abides, where our spiritual essence is. What is called sometimes the reincarnating ego, the reincarnated self, the one that sends a ray of itself for this form to shape in this physical world, and then again and again has experiences in different lifetimes. So this is all background information that is going to help us now to see what happens when we die according to this teaching. Something that I'm going to say about the mental world before we move on is that as we're saying that all these planes interpenetrate, all these energies are available to us. But there is an effort required. It's not that we can just wish to have an experience in the mental plane and it will happen. You know, for monks, it takes years and years and years and years of practice and discipline to sometimes have a glimpse of what this mental plane is. And that's why it is normally described as bliss, as a tremendous peace and joy. So let's go step by step. What happens as we leave this physical world? The first thing that happens is that that etheric double leaves the body, which means the cord is cut, and consciousness moves into the etheric double. So when that happens, the body starts to decompose. The energy that was keeping the body as a unit has been removed. So now the body doesn't have that connection anymore. The moment, and this has been described by a lot of people who have had near-death experiences. The moment we leave this physical world, even if it's just to the etheric double, there is this tremendous sense of peace. Because this life here on earth is so heavy. We just don't realize it sometimes because we're so used to it. But it's very, very heavy. So the moment we take a little step outside this world, there is this tremendous weight out of our shoulders. And that's why sometimes people don't want to come back unless they have something very important to do in this lifetime or someone they need to take care of. It is said that at the moment that we leave the physical world, some helpers come our way. Sometimes people see loved ones that passed away before them, and I am aware of clairvoyants that have in the past helped people who were transitioning. So because they are going to move now in the next step And I'll tell you that first, and then I keep going with the previous thought so you don't get confused. So consciousness stays for a little while in that etheric double, still on the physical plane. And here the person has the whole life review, a review of every single thing that happened in this lifetime, like a flash. So that tells you that all that information was never lost. It is there. So when we are in that etheric double, we see our life flashing in front of our eyes. And this is also an experience that have been mentioned in many accounts about near-death experiences. So the most predominant characteristics of that life, the images, the experiences, are going to stand out, and they're going to determine the next stage of the process. So this is also a very sacred moment. In this moment, there's going to be an emphasis on certain experiences, on those, the ones that were more relevant and that shaped who we are and that were important for this particular lifetime. And those images and those experiences are going to be the ones who are that are going to shape the next step. So this is a very special moment for the person who's leaving. And that's why there is so much emphasis on silence while we are next to a person who is departing. Silence, loving thoughts, peaceful thoughts, prayers, so the transition goes smoothly. So right after that, when that is over, the person falls into unconsciousness. And once that happens, there is no return to physical life. We're on the other side. So now what is going to happen is that consciousness is going to move from the etheric double into the astral body. So the etheric double now begins to disintegrate, like the body, like the physical body is. So now consciousness moves into the astral plane, a plane we're very familiar with because we go there every night, as we said. So in this stage, something more complex is going to occur. So as I said, every plane is subdivided in 7. The lowest parts of the planes are the densest. So as we move into this astral body and into the astral plane, we're going to enter into one of these subdivisions according to our vibration. So if our life, let's start with the densest. Before I said that, some people go straight through the astral plane, completely unconscious, and wake up in the higher state. Very spiritual-minded people who are not attached to their physical body and their state in this world. But we'll see that in a moment. So here's the part in which it's going to become unique for each one of us, depending on how we vibrate. So for people who have had very violent emotions, who have tremendous attachment to this world, who have been cruel to others, completely selfish, that resonates with the lower state of that plane. And this is what is called in Christianity hell. So this state doesn't last forever. It's temporary, like all the other states. And the person becomes a victim of their own desires and impulses. Everything in that plane becomes real. So whatever they carry with them becomes a reality in front of their eyes. So it's not that this process is something that someone is imposing on us, a punishment. It is just the experience of who we are. And we have to go through this experience of the astral plane to be able to purge, to purify those elements, to be able to move on. This purging in the astral plane is what in Roman Catholic Church is called the purgatory, the time in which we spend getting rid of the elements that cannot enter into the heavenly world. Are we good so far, or pretty much? Okay, good. So, according to which subplane we're going to enter in, the astral plane experience can be painful, can be unpleasant, or can be completely neutral. It would all just depend on our state. So something that happens here is that this astral body rearranges itself to have the densest aspects, the densest vibration outside, and then the higher ones, subtler in the inside. And the rearrangement happens so that each layer can disintegrate as it is being purified. So then as the layers of the onion, we're getting rid of and getting rid of and getting rid of things until we can move on. So because our astral body has a particular shape when we die, there is a resistance of rearranging. We don't want to let go. So something that it helped me when I gave birth to my daughter, but it's something that if we want to remember something when we're departing, when we're leaving, is let go. Just let go. Trust life. Let go. And the same thing as we give birth. The problem with this lowest subplane that we were talking about is that people there can see some frightening scenes, and all the cravings that they have had during life are still there, but they cannot be satisfied. So it's a very frustrating state. People who are entirely spiritually minded, with no attachments to life, whose main concern has been spirit or the spiritual life, pass through the whole astral plane in deep sleep, unconsciously. So they don't have to live these experiences, and they will wake up directly on the next plane, the mental plane, which is the heavenly world, sometimes called Devachan, the place of the gods, a state of complete bliss, in which nothing of this lower vibration can enter. But continuing with the layers of the subplanes of the astral plane, they're going to, as you can imagine, they're going to be lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. So in the middle, let's say, we're going to have an astral plane that looks pretty much like the physical world, and whatever surrounds us is whatever we project. So this is very important. Our most predominant thoughts in this lifetime are going to shape our after-death experience. Our most predominant thoughts in this lifetime are going to shape what we see and what we experience after we leave the physical body. So, how relevant is that? Now, in the two higher planes the two higher subplanes of this plane, we're going to find people who, particularly on this second, before the last one, we're going to find people who have been maybe religious but not really spiritual, maybe religious but selfish. And on the highest one, we may find people who are very intellectual, but just mostly as an exercise and not really as a tool that they use to help others. So another key word for this process is unselfishness. What we have done for others, or how much we have thought in terms of us and not so much in terms of me, makes a big difference in how and where we're going. Because that completely changes our vibrational state. So, to make a long story short, a very, very long story short, there comes a time for those who had to go through the astral plane in which there is a second death. We are going to leave the astral body and we're going to move into the mental body. And we again fall into a state of unconsciousness and we have a second life review. A second life review. So in this moment, again, flashes of all the experiences of this past lifetime are shown to us. Now, the differences of this the second time that we see the life review. I couldn't say life review. So the second life review, the difference between this second life review is that in this moment we can see with clarity why we had to go through those experiences. We can see with everything makes sense. We understand what happened, how we got there, why we got there, why it was important for us to go there. So it must be very gratifying because in that moment we have an understanding of what's going on. And we move over there. Every sad memory, every negativity in any way stays at that level, and we wake up in this state of pure bliss in the mental plane or heavenly world or Devachan, what is in Christianity called heaven, which is also temporary according to this teaching. It's a temporary state. Now, not that temporary in the sense that it is said that in the physical world we only spend 5% of the time of a lifetime, and we spend 95% in Devachan, or this heavenly world. So, that tells us that maybe that is home. Not this, because this is just a very short trip. We spent 95, we can say 95%. It's an approximation of the time over there. So here we may want to see ourselves like Steven Spielberg's E.T. or instead of saying E.T. phone home, which is, we find spiritual teachers, we go to therapy, we try to figure out what is this all about and where are we going, who we are and where do we belong to. So now moving into some particular practical aspects of this reality and this experience that we will all have to go through. Acceptance is, like we already said, inevitable, and at some point. And the faster we can accept, the faster we will release, the faster the process will go. The better the transition will be. So it is important for us to think sometimes of the moment in which death will find us. Sometimes just as an exercise to consider the moment that it is, it's time for us to leave, and how we would feel about that, and maybe practice a little bit of just relaxing, of just accepting. Another very close friend of mine passed away a couple of years ago, and she was a very spiritual person and a great example of how to leave this world. She was so ready for it. She was only 70, but she prepared her family, and she was just being completely aware of each process, just staying present and letting go, just pretty much like when you have to give birth to a baby. So those who are around them can help with loving thoughts, peaceful thoughts, with prayers. So to share a few things that connect how we can prepare for death, and or we can just prepare to continue to evolve, because as we said, there's really not such thing as death. Recently I was reading a book that I really like that is called The Cloud of Unknowing. It's a book that was written by an anonymous mystic teacher, and from the Christian tradition. And I was very surprised to find a paragraph that had to do with purgatory. But it was talking about this life in the physical world and not in the afterlife. So I wanted to share that with you. This particular chapter had to do with how the beginner in the practice of contemplative prayer has to deal with thoughts and impure impulses, like in Christian words, sinful impulses. And so the advice that this monk was giving was forget them. Put them in a cloud of forgetting and focus on God. Rise your heart toward God, toward love, toward unconditional, universal love. And he continues to say, rise above each memory or temptation and depend on love's energy. Keep on trying. Work hard and stick with it. And then he says, look on this work as your purgatory. And I thought that was perfect. And that makes perfect sense. So this life can also be, for us, a practice for the life that comes after. And as we go through this physical experience, we can prepare and purify and purge all the things that are going to be a hindrance, an obstacle as we move forward. And something he says a lot is love heals. That unconditional universal love that we can seek only in God, only in spirit, heals. And he says it even heals the processes after life. So there seems to be a very close connection between this lifetime and these attempts to purify and the actual purgatory after life. So based on these teachings, you can see that most of our work here on the physical plane is to rise above our more animalistic or more animal nature, the more biological part of us, the more physical. And one of the ways of working with that is through detachment, to see if we can start losing the attachment that we have to all things, to people, soften the identification that we have with the bodies, how much we identify with the physical body, the emotions, the thoughts that we have. We immediately feel that we are them. So then we become them. So is there a way of softening that relationship, that connection? Of not being so, depending so much on, what I want to be, that it has to be specifically this. With all the cravings that we have, can we soften the cravings, for example? And this will imply some physical, mental, emotional discipline of observing, of seeing, what can I go without? Can I soften this emotion that I normally have? Can I find myself without it? Another thing that we can do to prepare for death is to follow a spiritual practice, to follow a particular tradition and follow one practice, but fully, not just the parts that we like. Because in this modern world, we just choose the parts of the spiritual practice that we like and we leave the rest. But there's reason for the others, so maybe we should look into them as well. Another key aspect is, as I said before, changing the focus from me to us. And this doesn't mean to stop taking care of oneself. It means sometimes just to change the focus. It's not all about me. And we can begin to focus on other people's well-being, become more aware of what it means to love unselfishly. Another tool, the conscious development of virtue, and this is part of every tradition. Development of compassion, of wisdom, understanding, cultivate the interest to be of service to others. So that is the purpose of this lifetime. And that will bring wonderful rewards in the afterlife. So, before we finish, just a few questions. Is death a continuation of life? Absolutely. Do we shape our death experience as we live? Yes, to the most minimum detail. Every thought, word, action shapes who we are. Life in the physical world is so much shorter than we think. We normally think, life is so short. But I don't think we really have a sense of how short life is. This is just a fast trip. We come here to learn something. We're out of here very quickly in terms of universal time. So we have very little time in hand. Let's use it wisely as much as we can. So that's all I have to share tonight. If you have any comments, maybe you want to ask a question. I cannot guarantee that I will have an answer, but I can try.
Thank you, Juli. Please raise your hand if you do have a question, because we would like to record the question. And there is somebody who wrote, in while the people here are thinking. Wouldn't people that we encounter in the dreams also remember those encounters with us? If our dreams were actual episodes on the astral plane, instead of those episodes being merely figments of the imaginings of our sleeping brains.
So if I understand correctly, I think the question is, if we're sleeping, we may remember things that happen that are actually in the astral plane and not just our imagination. So there's actual things that happen to us in dreams. And yes, that is possible. The more we become conscious in the astral plane, the more we can remember the experiences that we have. And sometimes they are actual experiences. They're not just imagination or projection of our own mind.
Can I ask a follow-up based on that question? Just an element of it that I seem to maybe understand myself from it.
Yes, thank you.
Say there are two people have a dream, and you dream that you encounter Joe Smith there, and tomorrow you wake up tomorrow and you say, "Hey, Joe Smith," and he says, "Hey, Huli, it was a great time last night."
Right.
I mean, would both of you remember the encounter?
Yes, that's according to these teachings, that is completely possible. You just have to have the capacity to do that. Just to be able to be conscious in the astral plane, and you can actually meet there. Yes.
It's like.
And hopefully remember it, because the problem that we normally have is that the brain doesn't remember what we did.
Yeah. One more question. The etheric double leaves the physical body at death, and consciousness moves to the etheric double.
Yes.
Does the etheric and emotional body not have a consciousness themselves? I always pictured them as my higher selves. Could you explain a bit more, please?
Well, they do have the astral body, most of all, a type of very elemental type of intelligence. However, they are definitely not our higher self. We can experience those particular planes through them as our consciousness move into them. But our higher self is in much higher planes, as I explained later on. The incarnating ego, for example, dwells in that higher level of the mental plane. So, no, these are, they have a certain elemental intelligence, but certainly not the higher self.
I was going to ask a question about whether it's more important to be selfless, as in help other people, or whether it's more important to think about your own spiritual progress on this plane. But then I thought I should ask whether your definition of selflessness is just not focusing or identifying with that self that's not really you, or whether the definition is selflessness actually paying attention to the progress of other people. Like, how do you weigh the two against each other?
Okay, there's a few questions within one question. I'm trying to think how. Well, selflessness, as we follow a spiritual path, we get into the trap of thinking it is about my own personal expansion of consciousness. And what we're told over and over again is that there's no such thing, that spirit is one. So the effort that we make every time we sit for meditation, every time we encourage ourselves to be compassionate, we're doing that for everybody else. There's no such thing of like, I'm going to get enlightened. It's we are going to get enlightened. I sit every day for all of us, so we can have clarity, so we can find peace. So that is one, for example, way of unselfish practice. It's not just about me being free from suffering. It's about all of us being free from suffering. Because the more we move into that state of consciousness, the more we understand that that is a reality. It's not just, here we see each other, we're separate individuals. I'm taking care of myself. But the more we move into that consciousness, we realize that it is about all of us. So that's one part of the question. Is there another part of the question that I'm getting through?
I guess I always have a tendency to sometimes direct my attention outside of myself towards other people. And I don't know, and I've been told that might not be the right thing to do, and I should be, quote unquote, focusing on myself and my own, expansion of my consciousness or understanding, my own spiritual progress. And your answer was really interesting.
Okay.
And that would make me feel good to do that, to be able to consider it a benefit for everyone else if I do the right things. But I just still don't quite know where helping other people fits into it,
Yes, I think that it's important nowadays to always keep a balance, to keep balance between, being healthy, being stable, being balanced. And at the same time, if we can, and it's our own tendency to focus on others and others' needs, go for it. I mean, some of us struggle just to be able to think of others. If you have that natural tendency of thinking in terms of other people's suffering and other people's needs, good for you. As long as you can stay healthy and strong and energized and support yourself and, be functional, I think it's a great thing.
I just had two questions. One was something you said earlier, and maybe you can expand on it. You said our primary thoughts during this lifetime will affect our transition. So I'm curious about that. And then also, and this is kind of a Debbie Downer question, but from the news yesterday, there was a family that was murder-suicide. How do people make the transition when they've gone through a traumatic death like that? Or do you have any stinking idea?
Yeah. So the first part is that the predominant thoughts of this lifetime are who we are. Is that the tendency that we have, right? So then when we're on the other side, we're not different from who we were. And what happens on that, especially in the astral plane, is that our thoughts become a reality in front of us, in shapes, in scenery, situations, people. So that's how our most predominant thoughts shape the afterlife. Now, the explanations or the information about all what I shared with you tonight had to do with the death that comes as a natural result of the body just being ready to leave. And so that transition is smooth, and the body has a chance to prepare, and the person has a chance to prepare at all levels. Now, when it comes to suicide, it is a little bit more difficult because it is as if the person is all of a sudden on the other side. And what happens is that with suicide in particular, there is a lot that needs to be processed that wasn't processed during the lifetime. So life was interrupted. So depending on and we can never give an exact answer because every case is different, everything has an exception, and really, who knows what really happens. But what I've read from books is that, and if I remember correctly, is that the person may experience a period of difficulty in which they enter into a kind of a loop into the reasons why they made that decision. So they can learn from that experience. And eventually, apparently they have to spend the time that they were supposed to be alive in that condition. So they spend the rest of the years that they didn't live in that particular state. And then eventually they also move on and transition into all the other states. But it's a very sad condition. And also accidents are in that same category. Sometimes it is described as removing the pit of a fruit when it's not ripe. You know, it's like that.
I'll bring it. Okay, you go first.
You didn't really talk about reincarnation at all. I was just wondering how that fits into what you were talking about. And because it seemed like what you were saying was kind of a mix of Theosophy and Christianity. And how does reincarnation fit into this?
Sure.
And does it kind of negate what you were talking about?
Oh, okay. Yes, I forgot to mention that very briefly, the other part of, how do we get out of there? Well, pretty much in the same way we came in. But thank you for reminding me. The concept of reincarnation fits perfectly into this scheme that I just described. So what happens is that after, according to the teachings, a few centuries of being in Devachan, or the heavenly world, our true self, or the spirit, the individuality, sometimes called the reincarnating ego, sends a ray and builds again the bodies of the person that is going to become a new entity in the physical world. All the tendencies, I would say physical, emotional tendencies are waiting for the person at some level. So then when the person is born, is something important that I forgot to say is that in that state, in that heavenly state, there is a tremendous assimilation of the previous lifetime, and it is the place in which we actually learn fully, and we become a better version of ourselves, the 2.0 version of ourselves. So then, as we going back to what I was saying, we come back into the physical world again. The tendencies that we left from the previous life get attached to us again, and we become a completely different person in appearance, hopefully much wiser, more complete than the previous one, but still with many things to work on that are attached to the previous lifetime and also to the process that we did after death. So that would be a very summarized way of saying it.
And do you believe in reincarnation?
I do, absolutely, yes.
And yet you said...
You don't believe in waiting for the microphone. I know that. Now, careful.
Oh, now I lost my train of thought. So, but you also said that once you leave this earth, you don't come back. And that seems to contradict reincarnation.
Yes, yes. Okay, so yeah, for that there is another piece of information, and is that as human beings, I was describing the bodies and the planes, but I didn't say that there is, sometimes we're described as the personality that is conformed of the physical body, the emotions, and the lower part of our mind. And that part of us dissolves. As you have seen in the process that I described, in each stage there is something that is dissolving. First the physical body, then the etheric, then the astral. So those layers dissolve. Now, something remains, which is our true self, and that is the one that gathers all the experience from this lifetime. And when we come back to Earth again, we're not that same person. So from a certain point of view, reincarnation doesn't, let's say from the personality point of view, Huli, for example, is not coming back to the physical world. Who we are in this lifetime is just once. So my physical body dissolves, and those aspects, those personal aspects dissolves when I come back to the next lifetime. Essentially, I am the same soul, but I take a different form. And I take different, still the tendencies that I left from the previous incarnation. Yes, there's one more question here.
This one has been waiting for a while.
Okay.
So and it's a good question. Are there any teachings in the Theosophical Society on individuals who have deep love for one another being able to be together again on any plane? For example, the Devachan.
It's quite possible. I don't have very specific information about it, but it does make complete sense. Devachan is a place that is also of our own creation, of a much higher level. And affinity brings things together. Love brings people together. Of course, when we are at those levels, we don't really have the same attachment and the feeling of personal love that we have here. So that experience is almost impossible for us to understand with this concrete mind. But I would like to think so. In the same way that when we come back to life, those who have loved us or those we have loved are going to be in some way associated with us.
Is there a choice to come back? A choice not to be reincarnated, where you truly found an attachment here, not because it's bad, because it's understood, and there's no reason to keep coming back.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the question is there a choice to not come back to Earth? Eventually, there is a choice not to come back. What happens is that the tendency, the thirst for life, for experience, is so strong in us that it's just part of nature. We are part of nature. And so an example I heard recently about this is that, you know, when you are praying or when you are meditating for some time and you are in this place that is sometimes completely peaceful, and there is really no reason for you to get out of that place. However, we do. We always choose to get out of that moment and continue our life and do the things that we need to do. So in a similar word, just in a similar way, just as that as an analogy, we may feel it is as it, and I don't even want to use the word feel, but it will be just part of our like even spiritual instinct to just come back. However, I would keep that open in the sense that there's certainly all types of possibilities, and I don't have a definite answer for that. Eventually, when we become evolved enough, it is said that we choose to skip the heavenly world because it's like a vacation time. And for people who are actively coming to the world to help others, it's kind of a waste of time. So they choose to come immediately after they reach that place. There's no reason why to stay there with so much help needed here. So I feel that both possibilities are there.
I have another question. According to Leadbeater, in his book, Invisible Helpers, there is a band of helpers that help those on the astral plane. Can we all be invisible helpers? And the second part of the question seems to imply, maybe in this plane, we can help others in daily earthly life with random acts of kindness to do that which is right to do simply because it is the right thing to do.
Thank you. So yes, C.W. Leadbeater, who was a clairvoyant, who was associated with the Theosophical Society, he speaks about the band of helpers, a group of people who were had been born with also clairvoyance, and he was training them, helping them to develop that capacity. And one of the jobs, one of the works they did was to become those invisible helpers. So what they would do would be to go to the astral plane, probably allow the physical body to sleep, move consciousness into the astral body, go to the astral plane, and help, instead of most of us just being, dreaming and being floating in that space, or like having meaningless conversations or events in our dreams. Instead, they would be conscious of that place and they would help others. So people who had committed suicide, who didn't know where they were, or people who, right after an accident, they find themselves in the astral plane and they're shocked by the fact that they don't have a physical body. And so those are invisible helpers, help people who have the capacity to help others on that plane. And so even though we need the capacity to be conscious in that plane to be able to help, we can all offer ourselves when we fall asleep to be of help to whoever needs it. So just going to sleep with that thought, we just offer ourselves in the service of whoever needs it, and that is all we can do for now. Thank God.
Well, thank you so much, really. Thank you for your lovely words and your lovely presence. Very inspiring. Just want to make a couple of announcements. We do have a workshop this Saturday. Christina Pateros has done similar workshops here on a number of occasions. And Saturday she's doing an all-day workshop on the shamanic way of living, practicing, and creating with spirit. And she'll be exploring important shamanic practices, including earth ceremonies, journeying practices, and experiencing the three shamanic worlds for empowerment. Christina is kind of a regular at the Theosophical Society and has been doing workshops here and ceremonies for a number of years, and so she's got quite a good following. But if you're interested and would like to participate in that workshop, please go to our website and there you can register for it. If you want more information, you can speak with me. Thursday next week, we will have Pablo Sender back with us. And Pablo, as you know, was on staff here and lived here for quite many years, and then moved to Crotona, where he is. I call it the Western Paradise. I was there last week with him, and it was beautiful weather, sunny, and he's got a really pretty good deal. Now, it's a lovely place, but Pablo is coming. He comes here to visit us regularly. And next week, he's going to speak on a map of the field of consciousness. And he will then follow that up with a Saturday all-day meditation retreat on exploring the 4 states of consciousness. So remember Pablo next Thursday. And of course, if you can join him on the Saturday, that would be lovely as well. If you can come this Saturday, terrific. Just come every day. I'm here. You can come and visit me. Thank you for coming this evening. Please stay and have some refreshments. And of course, you can always ask more questions of Huli before she runs away. Thank you.